All right, welcome back to Extraordinary Unlocked. I'm really excited for my next guest here, Stephen Peele. We worked together many moons ago. And this brother of mine was so helpful in not only being a consultant in our organization, but also me as a young leader in navigating some really tough waters. So, incredibly grateful for him. I think his career story is exceptional and just thought it would be great to have Stephen on the podcast today. So I'm going to have Steven introduce himself, and then we'll dive right into hear his unlock story of how he unlocked extraordinary. Go for
Great.
it, Steven.
All right. Well, great to be here. Thanks again. You gave me too many kudos that I don't deserve, but that's okay. Because we had such a great time together. So that was fulfilling for me as well. But the real quick, the quick and dirty is today I'm a combination pastor and father, consultant, entrepreneur kind of thing, right?
Wow.
So, and it's been a great journey, but it's this combination of things that I think have synergy, that creates synergy in my life. So I don't actually switch gears. I actually move things across the table. I end up being able to use principles that I've learned different places and in different ways. And certainly the spiritual side of it is helpful because it gives you a moral foundation upon which to operate. And I think that's really incredibly important.
I love what you shared of just how you've got all of these different segments in your life: grandfather, family, work, pastoral. And many folks would be like, how do you even
Yeah,
reconcile
no,
all those things? And so we're going to dive into that. But the question that I love asking folks is, what was the first job you ever had? Like, this is
oh,
the first job where you pay taxes on, or one of my guests didn't pay taxes. They got paid under the table, which is totally
okay,
fine. This way
okay.
back, way back, way beyond the statute of limitations. But anyway,
That's fine.
curious what your first job was.
Wow, you don't want to know this because it's a very colorful story. Basically, when I was a young guy in the Bronx, I grew up in the Bronx, New York, and I was a young guy. My mom said, "Hey, you need a job." I was probably 16, so it was before formal, work history. But there was a group called the United States Conservation Corps. And what we did was we went around and did voluntary but somewhat paid activities to clean things up. Well, where they put me was probably a mile away from my home at a dump.
Oh no!
So
Like
in the
literal
Bronx,
garbage dump?
literally a garbage dump.
Oh my gosh.
And again, it was the conservation course. So theoretically, I was helping the environment, right? And it was interesting because number one, you got to show up. Number two, it's dirty work. Number three, you have to sort of generate a sense of meaning even in that, right? It was one of those things where, okay, I had to discipline myself, get up every day, make my lunch, head over to the place. I had to walk to it every day. And I walked across a little bit of a swamp area in the Bronx over to the Bronx. And it was probably the Bronx Municipal Dump or so.
Oh my god.
So it was character building, to say the least. The other good news was my mom, she worked because I'm the product of a single mother's, household. So she works and it was easier for her because I didn't need transportation. I could just walk over there. She could check on me and everything worked out. So that's the quick and dirty. It was a dump.
Quick and dirty. I know that was no pun intended, but truly,
No,
truly.
it wasn't. But
Yeah.
yes, it was a dump, a literal dump.
Amazing. Well, I always love those stories because where you're at today, you are far, far removed from anything like that. And would love for you to just sort of bring us along in what happened. You're 16, you graduate high school, what happens next? And then you start your career and you made some really interesting pivots in your career. And I'm going to ask more questions about that, but go ahead, Stephen, tell us.
Yeah, so from there, I had some other jobs, temporary jobs in New York City. But then as I finished high school, I went away to college at MIT, so that was fun. And got my engineering degree there.
Amazing.
and just spent, I really wanted to spend more time in college. It was one of those things where if I could have gotten my PhD or something like that, I would have preferred that. But, things didn't work out as well or in that regard. So I just went to work after that and went to work in Connecticut and also in Houston and
Oh,
also
wow.
in California. So by the time I got to California, yeah, it was pretty interesting. Those early years were a lot of just different aerospace organizations that I was working with, and the California gig was my first rocket science gig.
Wow. So tell us about that. Like, what were you doing? Rocket scientist,
Yeah.
literally.
Yeah, blowing stuff up and, using weird chemicals to, light fires under stuff. So, yeah, I used to work at, what was known as Rocketdyne, which is Rockwell, which has since been purchased by somebody else, but they have a rocket facility out there. So they do what they call pulse engines, and so a combination of sort of research about space, but then also testing of different rocket motor configurations. Sort of an interesting story. I ended up working while I was there on the space shuttle engine in the early days before the first flights. So we did a lot of the testing and things like that for Rocketdyne, who made that rocket motor. And it's an interesting thing because it's an air breathing. It's actually a combination rocket gas turbine, which is fascinating. So
Oh my gosh.
it was fun. Uh,
Now, you're right about to leave my intellectual capacity to understand it, so I'm glad you
Right,
stopped there. You're like, It's really cool." Okay, excellent.
right,
That's
right, right.
and so then what happens? You're doing the California thing, you're working on rockets. I'm sure was that aligned to where you're like, "Man, this is what I wanted to do for so long?"
It was because in my heart of hearts, in my mind, as a young person, I felt like, working for NASA would be cool. I'd done some research there before up in Cleveland, so it felt like a natural step. But God had other plans, and
Mm,
so I spent a couple of years out there. I got saved out there. So for anybody who believes in the spiritual interventions that God brings into our lives, that's where one of them happened. Where I was out in LA, and there are fires everywhere, and I was having dreams at night, things like that. Yeah, I just interpreted that as God calling me. He was reaching out. He was like, "Okay, know that there's more to this than the
yeah,
things that you see."
that's amazing, and then what happens after California? Because it sounds like you almost had a trajectory, and that's, again, no pun intended, we're talking about
Yeah,
rockets,
yeah.
but what happens after that?
Then I come because I did, I felt like God was calling me out of California, literally.
Okay.
So I looked for a job and I found one back in Connecticut, which was similar to what I was doing. So moved back to Connecticut for a period of time. I was thinking of then getting my master's degree, but I didn't at University of Connecticut. But then I met my potential future wife out in Connecticut. So that was that turn. I didn't end up marrying her. She was perfect though. She was, the quintessential picture of what I thought I needed and wanted and was gonna work out, but it didn't work out. But at least I spent a little bit of time. I did a little bit more post, you know, um, some additional education. I met her. From there, I decided that, okay, if we're going to be together, we should probably move somewhere else where I had a better career track. The better career track was in Cincinnati, working for GE, doing a similar kind of work. So another hop and a skip, but that's where I am today. So that one, I believe, was God moving.
So you move from California,
Hey, yeah.
Connecticut, you
Yeah,
meet
yeah.
and then like, "Okay, I need to align this effort here to a better paying better job," whatever, and GE at that time was the quintessential "you've made it" kind of
It
organization.
definitely was.
Yeah, and
It
and especially being in the profession you were, working on airplanes and working on rockets, I
mhm.
mean, that's so exciting. So tell us, like, and that's the Jack Welch era. I think he
That
was
is.
CEO during
It
that time.
is. Yeah, no, it was a great learning experience. It was like drinking from the fire hose, which, going to MIT, it sort of reminded me of that a little bit.
Yeah.
But GE, top of its game. Nobody knew, or a lot of people didn't know they were in aerospace, aircraft engines. They did a lot of propulsion work. Yep, so their suite of offerings was broad. At the time, they were working on what we now know as the F-22, believe it or not, and so they recruited me for that program.
My
So,
gosh.
came to Cincinnati, got all of those things were secret, so I can't talk to you about any of it. I mean, it's and I don't remember enough to be
Right.
valuable.
Right. Right.
But yeah, what became the F-22 was what brought me to Cincinnati to work, and, GE's just been a fantastic company for so many years.
Yes. Oh my gosh. And so was there ever a moment because our paths crossed when you were in the consulting world.
Yeah,
And I'm curious just how did that transition happen? Because Stephen, what you shared so far, it is such a wild story. You've
it's a
been to so
wild
many
story.
different places, you've seen different things, and we're just getting the 30-second soundbite. So living the lived experience 1,000 times different. But what happens from GE to going
Yeah.
into consulting? Like, what was that shift? How did that happen?
Oh, man. Yeah, okay. Deep, deep breath. And while I was at GE, I did a number of things, including Six Sigma. I did some web and internet work. By the time I was at the end of my career, I felt at GE, I had
Mm,
amassed some understanding about broad issues like the internet, technology application, and I had sort of put my toe in the water and felt confident with that stuff, even the Six Sigma stuff.
yeah.
I'd in the interim, while I was working full time, I'd also gotten my MBA down at University of Cincinnati. So all those things sort of coalesced, and at that point, I felt like I was equipped to start a business. And then some guys that I knew from GE and also from P&G decided, hey, let's start a consulting company because look at all the knowledge that we got from working at these top companies.
Yes.
And why can't we leverage that? Why can't we just start a consulting firm and get out there and help other people, help our friends? That was one of the phrases we used, and help the people that can trust us to tell them the truth, to work with them and understand their issues, and then unravel those with solutions. So we started a consulting firm right around near the time of 9/11. Aviation then got hit, and we said, okay, that's good timing.
Mm,
And we got out there and just started beating the bushes to, work with either our friends or people we had prior to that worked together or new people. So, from there, for that next 22 or so years, we had a consulting company we started, and, we worked together to work with different clients. So, that's where the consulting stream came in.
oh my goodness. So when you were at GE, you sort of living your best life, and you sort of knew it was time to leave because it is hard. I mean, they talk about, and I don't know how much you're making or whatnot, but you work for this premier company, maybe have some golden handcuffs on. You're like, man, it would be tough to leave, and it would be tough. It would be a risk, and yet there was some level of conviction that you must have had to say, this is the step of faith I must take
Yes.
and the courage to take it. Like, can you walk us through some of that?
Yeah, no, and it was difficult because, not only was GE sort of the pinnacle for a lot of people, right? I used to travel the world. I was, had clients in Asia, so I'd go back and forth to Singapore or Kuala Lumpur. So that was really attractive because I could walk in rooms, and because I had the GE logo on me, and I had actually become an executive for the company, instant respect. Right? You didn't have to tell people who you were because the actual brand carried you, but it still wasn't satisfying for me. I
Mm,
felt like there was a limitation in that, you still had to toe the line corporately. You still had to have, because you wore the brand, you had limitations on what you could talk about and how you can engage people. And I
yeah,
was really getting moved internally around, the honesty of being able to make the right decisions based on the truth, quite frankly, you know?
Yeah.
And not I wasn't really as excited about some of the corporate limitations around being able to do that. So, the combination of working with some other people to solve problems and to do it in a more personal way, became the real attraction to the consulting environment, and it just felt like the right timing.
Yeah, yeah, and as you're doing the consulting gig and you're pounding the pavement, you're working with friends and probably working with new clients, I mean, what was the level of satisfaction in moving into that?
It was huge. It was huge because all of a sudden I was in the room with people. I was working with teams. I was coaching people just, on the side. Here's how we can navigate this thing. Here's how we can fix it. I'm watching the interpersonal dynamics because as a consultant, you're the outsider, but that's a good thing.
Yeah,
Because they want an outsider. They want somebody with, fresh eyes, we call it. Fresh eyes to come in and look at the problem and see something different. You don't always, but often you can add some elements that nobody thought about, or you could coach people into the engagement. You can coach them into, "Okay, here's what we're gonna do, but here's what you gotta do to be able to help that happen." And so we ended up in a lot of conversations with people, interpersonally, about how to do a better job, how to get other people on board, how to now create the dynamic in the culture to make change happen. That's when that became something that I started to realize, man, that's exciting.
yeah.
Moving organizations, not because you lead the organization, but because you influence the organization.
I love that, and I would love to hear 2 stories. One
Mhm.
is, what was one of the biggest challenges as you open the consulting firm, and there are always those moments of second guessing, doubt.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not sure. The fear starts rising. You wake up, you're like, "Oh my gosh, I just left GE." Like, what did I
Yeah,
just
yeah. No.
well, what was one of the biggest challenges? Now then I'll ask a follow-up after that. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, the biggest challenge is thinking to yourself, "Look, there's no guaranteed income.
Yeah.
You you're on your own." Right? You go and it was like getting dunked in a cold bath, right? You go from this nice, warm stock options, brand, relatively easy, although the intensity of the work was high. You knew you got a paycheck. Always knew you were getting a paycheck. So to go from that to just a standing start, and then wow, if I don't get a client, guess what? I don't eat. I don't the money doesn't come in. There's nobody else I can sort of call up and say, "Hey, could you lend me some money?" kind of thing.
Right,
It really was, "Look, if it's not there, you didn't do something 6 months ago." But that was excellent training for owning your own life.
Mm,
Instead of being in this place where it's comfortable and somebody else is gonna take care of you and, you don't we worked hard, but it was a different psychology. The psychology of money's coming so you can relax. So the biggest challenge in that is keeping your wits about you when you're sleeping at night and you have no idea where the next dollar's going to come from. That's what I would say was the biggest, and it's a psychology. At a certain point, I was talking to some of my friends that were still in GE, and I said, it is a weird kind of thing because 6 months, a year ago, I would have been freaking out about that. I would have not been able to sleep. And I was connecting with them because they were talking about, "Well, we're gonna get our options this year," and, they were talking about that, and I couldn't compare, right? I couldn't say, "Well, I'm getting op" no, I'm not getting options.
yeah,
I'm out
yeah.
here trying to figure out how that next paycheck's coming.
Wow, I love that story because and now we're way far removed from that. You are on the other side of it, but in that moment, those fears can seem like
Yeah.
giant and
Yeah.
overwhelm what's going to happen. And the follow up I had for that is share a success story you had with a client where it was just so aligned to like, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing.
Yeah.
B, you just knew I'm on the right path and find those fears seem
Yeah.
so small now, and
Yeah, yeah.
now I'm living into my calling.
Yeah. And it's interesting because the successes straddle those two eras, we'll call them
Mhm.
eras, right? The
Yeah.
era of corporate. The era of corporate that gave me the greatest satisfaction that propelled me into the era of consulting was working with an airline that hated us. So I brought the logo in, they knew who I was. That wasn't the issue. The issue was that we had failed them so many times before,
Mm,
and then they shoved me in there and said, "Go fix it." That's basically what happened. But the story ends with this person in the airline became one of my, would I say best friends? We became very good friends.
mm,
He respected the fact that I worked with him. I was honest with him. I worked for him in the sense of within the company. And that trust built was the greatest satisfaction I had had on
mm,
any work I had done, was knowing that this guy, and he got me perks at the airline. He did all kinds of stuff, but we connected.
yeah.
So that became the goal. And as I move over into consulting, that issue became, now I'm connecting with CEOs or high level people and I'm building friendships. It's not just that I'm performing work, and I am performing work, but I'm building friendships.
Yes.
So the satisfaction I got, and it was a subtle thing. One of the gentlemen that worked in a food company that I got to know, the CEO, and he had a tragedy in his life,
Wow.
and it broke my heart.
Yeah.
And so I think he could feel my care, that I cared for what happened. I couldn't change it. It's not like I could fix it, but the fact that I cared about him, and this is interesting because it wasn't that he cared about me, it was that I cared about him. So then all of a sudden it was like, that looks like satisfaction. That looks like meaning.
Yeah. That is so powerful. And there's this phrase, this adage that I've really held to for how I lead and how I connect with people. When anytime I meet folks or I'm in charge of something, people don't care how much you know until they
Mhm.
know how much you care. I had a
Absolutely.
mentor, really a young pastor, tell me that when I was leading a group and I came in with the title,
Yeah.
the knowledge,
Yeah.
just the expectation, people will just hold to every word I have to say.
Yeah. Yeah.
And nobody showed
Imagine
up.
that.
Nobody cared.
That's right.
Shocking. I didn't
Yeah.
understand what was going on, and
Yeah.
my pastor at the time told me, "Eugen, let me just tell you this truth. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care." And I leaned into that, and I have never been disappointed. Never once, because that is so true what you shared. These folks in the C-suite, yes, a lot of eyeballs are on them, but when it comes to trust, friendship, relationship, folks that you can lean on, that circle is so small
Yes.
beyond any family. And so for you to be able to bridge that, and I've actually witnessed that at the organization we were at. You were able to build not only a level of respect and authority in what you shared, but a high level of trust with senior leaders that did not trust many people, in my opinion.
No, they're
Trust.
lonely. They're lonely. That's the aha moment. They're the top of the hill. It's lonely up there. It's not easy. I mean, everybody's asking you to solve the problems. All the tension is rolling uphill to you potentially. So yeah, the awareness, and that made me a better consultant because then I cared about them. I cared about them. It's like, okay, let me look at the world you're living in, not just the problem you have, right? Because you got plenty of those,
Yeah,
but you don't have anybody potentially that actually cares about you in the role that you're in.
that is just that is a golden nugget, just in terms of the work that we do. At least for me, oftentimes I was chasing after the title, the role,
Real.
and yeah, and when I meet people like yourself that you have a level of authority when you come in as a consultant, and you didn't wear the GE brand, but you came in with a very reputable consulting group. And you immediately were able to build a relationship with me.
Mhm.
And that is stuck. I mean, we haven't been there for years, yet at the same time, when I pick up the phone to call you, it was as if time had not moved and just caught up. just where we left off,
Yes,
and incredibly grateful for that. And I'm so grateful that you're sharing that because the power of relationship unlocks extraordinary.
it does.
Because someone sees something in you that you could not see in yourself. And Stephen, I'll be candid. There were times that you would speak things into my life or speak things to me that I couldn't see for myself. Yet to hear it from you, it gave me such encouragement and just renewed sense of energy.
Yeah.
And so grateful to you for that. But I see that it's not just me you're doing that for. Though I felt very special in the moment, but it's every relationship. And so greatly appreciate that.
No, and I'm not lying, right? That's the other, remember I pointed out that issue of truth?
Yes.
You gotta be able to say what's true in your life
Yeah.
because you can't live in a lie, but then once you get into that practice, it's easy to do. It's
Yes.
easy to just say, "Hey, man, check it out. Here's what I'm wow, did you ever consider this?" Because you're not scared of saying what's true.
Yes.
You're not afraid of that, and that's a really good habit. Just like people get in the habit of lying,
Mhm.
that's a habit.
Right.
Once you start playing that game, you do it just normally. I've got kids, they did that, right?
Right.
And it was like, "Why are you lying about that? That does why would you lie about that?" And it was
Yeah.
just a habit, it became habitual, and the same way is true with truth. If you focus on the truth, you get used to delivering what you believe is true and being honest about that, then it becomes habit.
Wow. So powerful. I think back to that moment when you knew it was time to go on your own, to blaze a new trail.
Mhm.
And thinking about that listener today that feels like I've got golden handcuffs. I'm in a great career. I work for a great company. And there's a level of stirring and unsettledness where there may be a misalignment with values,
Yeah.
misalignment with just the decisions the organization has made.
Yes.
And that fear of the steady paycheck, the safety net of, "Hey, I've got some stock options coming through, and I mean, why would I leave?" But what do you tell that person in that moment where they're in the fork in the road?
That's a great question. There's a cost of doing nothing.
Wow, tell me more. What does that mean?
It challenges you to think about, okay, are you just surviving? Or are you really thriving? Is this aligned with you, or are you just going through the motions hoping that it becomes that way? It
Mm,
asks some critical questions of you about whether you're just going along with it or you're on fire for it. And the cost of doing nothing is the fire could go out, the opportunity could be missed, and you could miss your calling in life or delay it by just not facing into it. So it's people think about, and the contrast is the cost of me leaving is X. That one's easy.
yes.
I give
Yep.
up stock options. I lose my fancy parking space. I still have, what I earned. It was a gold parking pass at GE, and it was so coveted.
Really?
Yes, it was at a certain point. I think it was like 7 years and a certain level. You got a gold parking pass, and that gold parking pass allowed you to be in the perimeter close to the building because the perimeter was secure. I still have that thing because it meant something in terms of achievement. It's like, wow, okay. But there's a cost to those things.
Mm.
And so, in order to stay in that, it had to be worth it. But then when I evaluated it, it wasn't. And then I had to say, okay, well, if that's not worth it, what is? What am I willing to sacrifice for? What am I willing to pay for? And what's the upside of taking that track versus the downside of leaving this one? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I never thought about that because you're right. When you all of us can do math, and when you put the numbers down, that number can seem like an insurmountable wall.
Yes.
What you just said is there's a cost to doing nothing. The opportunity cost, the engagement when the fire goes out, and I think all of us that work for corporate or organizations that don't have um a self-employed role,
Yeah.
when that fire goes out,
You
wow,
hang. Yeah. Yeah.
wow.
Yeah.
And it can feel like a grind on the daily because you're like, "Okay."
Absolutely.
And there's a cost to doing nothing. I think that for me is so powerful, and for the person that's listening, like, "Nah, I'm good, I'm safe, I
Right.
don't feel great, but I got a great paycheck coming
Yeah,
in."
yeah.
And, that there is a cost to doing nothing. Powerful. Okay, so I come to the lightning round at the end,
Go.
and I love
I'm waiting.
asking random question. Yes.
Go for it.
No fighting, no fighting.
No, no, of course not. You
As you know, I didn't realize this, but as I watched my old podcasts that I've done already, I always ask something about food. So I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna
wow.
keep it going. So you traveled the world, you've gone all over the place.
Yes, sir.
When you come back to Cincinnati, Ohio,
Mhm.
what makes it feel like home? What's the first meal you grab and you're like, "Oh, I'm back in
I'm
s."
home. It's probably I mean, it's not gonna be exciting because it's probably the local pizza more than anything, right?
Really? Tell me
Yeah,
about the local pizza.
I mean, there's so many choices now, but early on, it was Donato's Pizza.
Okay.
Donato's, you can get a thin crust. There was always plenty of pepperoni on top. I like pepperoni pizza. So the comfort food for me would have been pepperoni pizza from Donato's.
Okay, I love it. I love that. I wanna know, you're a well-read person, I could tell by the bookcase in your background. When you think of the top 3 books
Mm,
that have just shaped and formed who you are today,
yeah.
can you give me your top 3?
Top 3. Um, Purpose-Driven Life's a big one just because of I'm thinking it was more the title,
Yeah.
than anything else. Because, the other one that's close was, what was it? Principle-Centered Leadership.
Hmm. Who is that by?
That was Covey.
Okay.
I'm a big fan of Covey. He was so simple and
Yeah,
straightforward, but the genius was in the simplicity.
100%.
Principle-centered leadership, what rocked my world. That it was just like, you mean it can be principle-centered? I mean, it's like it's not just doing things based on a script. It's not doing things based on a routine. It really is driven by principles. That to me took me to the level of, oh, then there are principles that drive leadership, and what are they?
Yeah.
I ended up doing that. I ended up taking the track from there to Maxwell. I got deeper into Covey, and so it sort of opened up a whole new world of understanding business and leadership in particular. So
Powerful.
that's those 2. What would I say is the 3rd? Pat Lencioni. I'm another very core set of understanding around teams. I love I love his, 5 dysfunctions or 5 we've renamed it because it was negative, right? Um,
Yeah, 5 behaviors of a
the
cohesive
5 behavior right. But it was like, "Oh, you mean there are 5?"
Right.
Right? And it sort of narrows you down. It's like, "Okay, number 1, you care about team performance." The performance factor is another one because Pat McMillan talked about the performance of teams, how you mature it, understand the different dynamics of teams and what kind of team you got. And so he forced you into a conversation about how teams work and do you understand how they work? So those would be at the top of my list in terms of just really influential ones that I could look back and say, okay, when I read principle centered leadership, something shifted in me. I behaved differently after that. 5 dysfunctions, I behaved differently after that. So those things are at the top of the list.
Thank you for sharing that, I love that.
Cool.
You got the spiritual, the leadership, and the team. I mean, does it get any better than that? That's
I mean,
great. Okay, last question, and, what was the last vacation you took?
well, it's bad. You don't want to know this.
Was it, like,
You
10 years ago? No, I'm just
It's
kidding.
gonna implicate things in my life that are out of balance, and I'm okay with that, right? It's like,
Okay.
it was Napa,
Oh.
believe it or not. My wife forced me to go. After years of travel, I didn't wanna ever travel again. Yeah, I'm burnt out with hotel rooms and airplanes and stuff like that. Although I love airplanes, but I don't wanna get on one that much anymore. But it was probably what was it, about 8 years ago? It was before COVID.
Okay.
And we went to, Napa because we have relatives that are out there, and again, it's far, it's planes, trains, and automobiles, right? It's you fly into San Francisco, then
Yep.
you drive through the mountains, you end up on,
Yes.
darn near in Utah. I mean, it was hard to get there, and it was just a pain in the neck, but what a relaxation.
Mm.
The lake up there is beautiful. It was just quite the experience. And so we went to Truckee, we went to all the little places around there, saw the different wineries and things like that, but got a real break, walked in the woods, and just got back to recognizing how little I take vacations and how much I should be doing more.
Yes. Yes. Do it for your family, do it for your wife, get on a plane.
Yeah, to this day, she keeps saying, "Are we going back to Napa?" 'Cause she's been there like 5 times since then. She just she just decided, "Hey, if you don't wanna go, I'm going." And we got relatives, so that makes it work well, right? So she
Yeah,
just tools out there. But yes, that was the last, and it was memorable because it was like, "Nah, I gotta do this some more."
yeah. Well, Stephen, this has been such a joy to dive into your career, how you unlocked extraordinary, and you continue to do that, not only for yourself, but so many people that you meet. So I wanted to say thank you for being on the pod.
So
Such a
you are more than welcome. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah. All right. We'll talk soon.
Alright.
And thank you, extraordinaires, for listening in. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Alright, take care. Bye.